Hey everybody, what's going on? Me and Josh would like to welcome you all to the first episode of a new series we're going to be doing here on the Crossover U College Hoops Talk podcast called the State of the Program. This is something we're going to be doing every offseason in college basketball, where now, right around this time, considering that draft deadline decisions are set in stone in terms of who's coming back to school and who's staying in the draft, rosters are for the most part all finished out. Of course, there's a few ads which might happen in the later stages of June. But again, these rosters, for the most part, finalize and are going to be set in stone. So me and Josh are just going to be talking about some of our favorite teams in college basketball, some of the big name programs, and just essentially what the state of that program is. We're going to talk about some of the losses and in terms of who they've lost to the NBA and in the transfer portal, as well as who they've added in the transfer portal and incoming freshmen. We'll also talk about how we feel about their coaching, where they stack up in their conference going into the year, and just the vibe surrounding the program. We'll give each one of those things a ranking and as we go, and we'll just pretty much talk about how we feel about each program going into next college basketball season. But before we get into the first episode of the State of the Program series, if you like this podcast or anything else you see on this channel, please engage with our content any way you can. We're just liking our videos, subscribing to our channel, or just telling other people. It really does help with growing what we do here at the Crossover. So I think the program which me and Josh would both like to start with here is the team that we both have as our preseason number one right now, that being the Houston Cougars, who just went on a really, really amazing run to the Final Four, made it to the national championship game. Of course, they kind of fumbled that last play with Emmanuel Sharp losing the ball in the waning seconds. Of course, they lost to Florida. But the Houston Cougars, they've reloaded. They've got guys back. They're bringing in a loaded freshman class, and I definitely think they're right back in position to compete to get back to a Final Four. So let's start with some of their losses right off the bat. In terms of guys they've lost, LJ Cryer, who was their leading scorer this past year, big time shot maker, he's out of eligibility, so he's gone. Same thing goes with Juwan Roberts, their anchor down low. He averaged 10 points per game this past year. And it was big on the glass, so definitely a big loss in losing those two guys to graduation. In terms of guys they lost to transfer portal, Terrence Arsenault, a guy that Kelvin Sampson was really, really high on, unfortunately left the program and is going to NC State now. Malik Wilson's also gone, along with Javier Francis. Two guys who, played minutes, played roles, but nothing all too crazy. Josh, I'll ask you first. How do you feel in terms of what Houston's lost?
Not a lot. I get it that LJ Cryer leaving is a big deal, but he can be replaced very easily. He was only a 16 per game, a point per game scorer. Not that much for a team that, you know, is a large program. And Houston is very good at producing not a singular good player, but a group of similarly talented guys that can fill the same role on a given night. And that's one of the best parts of Houston's game is that ability to have a diverse set of ball handlers and scorers, which makes the loss of Cryer and to an extent Javier Francis and Terrence Arsenault not that bad. Um, I'm personally going to rate that a 9 out of 10 losses. It could be so much worse given that the transfer portal takes from a lot more these days.
Yeah, and just for clarification, a 10 for all of these attributes being losses, ads, coaching, conference, and vibes. A 10 would be the highest you can get. So that means, 10 is the best. One would be the worst. So in terms of Houston, I'm a little bit lower than you in terms of where I'd rank, but I can come up to a 9. Again, losing LJ Cryer is huge. You lose your clutch shot maker. But again, they got guys back, which is what we're going to talk about coming up in these ads and in terms of guys who they've retained. And a lot of losing Terrence Arsenault definitely hurts a lot. He's a guy who had a lot of potential, definitely could have been a big time player for them. But again, they've replaced those guys quite well with what they're bringing in. So yeah, I can come up to a 9 for that. And in terms of their ads for this next segment here, they are, well, largely with the biggest story I think for Houston is probably what they're bringing back in terms of guys they're retaining. A lot of starters from or big role guys from this past year's Final Four team. That being Emmanuel Sharp, Joseph Tugler, and probably the biggest guy they got back was Miles Suzan, who is going to be the starting point guard for them this upcoming season. He's probably, you can make the argument, look like one of the top point guards in the country in the latter months of the season this past year. And on top of that, they're also bringing in a loaded freshman class, 4 5-star guys. Those being Kristanak Jr., Um, Looking right now, Cordelius Jefferson, or my mistake, not Cordelius Jefferson. Isaiah Harwell, Kingston Flemings, and Bryce Jackson. So two guys in that mix who I think could definitely crack that starting rotation, and the other two guys will definitely bring a lot off the bench for them. So ads, I might have him at a 9. Honestly, I think the thing that maybe keeps him away from being a 10 for me is I just don't know how those 5-star guys are going to accept having to play a role. I mean, like you mentioned with Houston, it's never really one guy who dominates scoring wise or production wise. It's really collective effort, and you worry sometimes about 5-star freshmen coming in with a little bit of an ego. If these guys aren't as ball as much as they want or are getting the number of shots they want, then they could get a little frustrated, and that just worries me slightly.
No, I definitely see your point. I would also rate them a 9. I think, once again, bringing back the guys that built you a championship team that didn't graduate is a huge deal because, you don't have to replace 20 points a game like that. Like, it takes a lot of effort to
Right.
remove these guys or to replace any type of guys like these. And they both have great experience doing them, especially using. And to also add in two top 20 ESPN 100 prospects, or just like some of the best freshmen that Houston has ever had on a already championship caliber team is amazing. There's a reason why we're putting them as number one team, and I think that this is one of the best incoming teams that they have. It doesn't really matter they don't pick up from the portal. They did have Pop Isaacs for a hot minute, but he left once Uzan came in. And honestly, Uzan is better than Isaacs.
Yeah.
So I really don't think it's anything that bad.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. In terms of fitting a role and playing a big part of your culture, I think getting Miles Suzanne back is definitely better than having Pop Isaacs, just because Pop Isaacs, I think, is a little bit better when he's on ball a lot and kind of playing more so isolation ball. I think he's gonna be great in that Bucky system at Texas A&M. But in terms of just the one slight I think you could point to at Houston's roster this past year was they had great culture, great toughness, tenacity, energy. I think the one thing you could point at as to what they were lacking was talent. There is no lack of talent this year. You're bringing in a loaded freshman class. Josh mentioned two top 20 kids in the ESPN top 100. And I mean, I think that kind of ties into coaching here. We'll get into Kelvin Sampson now. In the job he's done recruiting, I mean, you really thought that perhaps at the end of, I know the news did come out that, midway through the season that Houston was going to be landing these freshmen, but I think for a lot of people, they thought maybe that was going to be Kelvin Sampson's last knock at a national championship, and he's right back, putting himself in position to try to do it again. So great job recruiting wise for Kelvin Sampson, and on top of that, just being able to retain guys to could have the continuity of your culture, which also speaks to what he's built in Houston over the last few years, and going to the Big 12, tough conference, which Kelvin Sampson came out and said that he wasn't necessarily sure he wanted to make the move to in the first place, but actually ended up doing really, really good things for the Houston program. And being able to play better competition in the regular season, build themselves up, battle test them for when the NCAA tournament rolls around. And it's paid off for them in the last few years. And going to next year, I mean, you look at what Kelvin Sampson did in proving that you can still win with toughness and heart and culture in a world of college basketball. It seems to be so talent driven with the big numbers being thrown around at guys in the NIL. In NIL money in the transfer portal. And he's proven that it doesn't necessarily just take that to win. You can still win based off heart, toughness. And now he has the talent to go with that. So, I mean, I'm really excited to see the job Kelvin Sampson does this upcoming year.
Definitely. I think another big thing is, and like you mentioned, Kelvin Sampson with the coaching. Coaching is one of the biggest deals in honestly any sport, and with college basketball, it's a huge strength when you have a very good coach. Obviously, we know Kelvin Sampson has had an insane level of experience. He's been in this sport for almost 30 years now, I think even more than that. And if you're going to look at how he's been as of recent, he's been at his prime in terms of coaching. Just made a natty, has had the third straight year being a one seed, won the Big 12 this year, was in the won the Big 12 last year regular season. Like, you can really mix and match whatever you want to say with him. He is having the best coaching prime in the Big 12 right now, and one of the best coaching primes right now in college basketball. So if you're going to give me the coaching for ratings, I'm putting that as a 10, flat out.
Yeah.
He's a top 3 coach.
Yeah, I mean, based off his Final Four performance on the sideline alone, I mean, I think he coached circles around John Shire in the late stretches of that Final Four game against Duke, and in the national championship game. I mean, I think he had a great game plan for Florida. They really limited Walter Clayton, which was what they had to do. And obviously, it was just a late game blunder on that last play where maybe you could have drawn something better up. But of course, Emmanuel Sharp kind of fumbling the ball there doesn't help your case whatsoever. But again, I mean, just the job he did coaching the NCAA tournament. You talked about him having probably the best peak for any coach in the Big 12 right now. Fully am behind you on that take. And yeah, I'd probably have Kelvin Sampson at a 10 too. So in terms of their conference standing going into next year, I believe we both are in the same boat where we believe Houston is the front runner in the Big 12. I definitely think they're one of the few teams that have kind of separated themselves from the rest of their conference going into the preseason. The SEC, for example, probably will end up being the best conference in the country next year. I think Big 12 is right behind them. But again, the SEC, it could really be anyone's conference this year. Houston, I think, is definitely separated themselves from the rest of the pack in the Big 12. BYU will be really good this year, but I think BYU is a tier behind Houston. You also think of Arizona, but I, again, think Arizona is going to be more so in the middle of the pack in the country in the top 25, as opposed to Houston, who we think will be a Final Four contender. And in terms of
Yeah,
that, I think conference standing going into the year, I would probably have them as a 10 too.
I would. I think I'm going to put it at a 9 just because the Big 12
Okay.
is a little bit more open than other conferences. Houston is the favorite, pretty dominant, but BYU stands in their way. Kansas and Kansas State can be dark horses.
True.
You have a strong Arizona team that's brewing in the desert. I think that there are going to be a lot of tough challenges for this Houston squad, but compared to previous years, this Houston team feels like just the correct amount of Big 12 power, but also great at other non conference opponents and can kind of fill the dual role that it needs to have with being great at the Big 12 schedule, but also capable of dealing with a Duke or a Purdue or another top team that they would likely face in the tournament. So
Right.
I'll put
Yeah,
it a
no,
9.
yeah, I hear you out there. I'm willing to come down to a 9 for that. I definitely hear you out there. I do think they've separated themselves a little bit more on than maybe some other teams in different conferences. But yeah, I could definitely hear you out with BYU. I'm very, very high on BYU. I know you are as well. So I could definitely see that being a really tough matchup for them in league play. So yeah, I'll come down to a 9 for that. And for the last attribute here to talk about vibes going into next year, how are we feeling about the Houston Cougars? What's their ceiling?
I mean, the ceiling's a natty.
Right.
Vibes are at an all time. This is, in all correct terms, the best team that has ever been produced in Houston since the Phi Slamma Jamma days. Maybe even better considering they never even won the chip. They were seconds away from winning it last year. They're bringing back an arguably better and more rated team per se, and they're showing, especially now and especially with coaching, that things are ready. Houston Stadium is getting packed very consistently these past few years, and it's going to stay packed, overpacked. The culture in Houston has changed so well. You got to give it to just the whole team and obviously coaching. You got to. Kelvin Sampson has really changed how Houston views its basketball team from a college perspective and a local perspective. So when you look at that, that's a slam dunk 10 right there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm totally with you. I think vibes are at an all time high if you're a Houston Cougar fan. Of course, you're coming off a really heartbreaking finish to that national championship game. But again, that does not take away from how amazing that run was to watch. I mean, just to think back when Kelvin Sampson took over the Houston job, he was walking around campus trying to get students to go to the games. Now the Fertitta Center is rocking every time they play a home game. That's not going to change this year. I think this has the chance to be, like you mentioned, one of the best, if not the best, Houston teams ever. I think it's going to be by far the most electric with how much talent is going to be on the floor. In terms of their starting lineup, I would probably bank on it right now being made up of Milos Uzan at the point, Emmanuel Sharp, Joseph Tugler, Chris Sinak. Not, we'll see what happens with him playing either the 5 or the 4. I'd probably say the 4, Tugler at the 5, and I think Isaiah Harwell. I think he brings great size. He'll add to the wing or the 2 spot in that lineup. But yeah, and then you have those other 2 freshmen coming off the bench. You also bring back some other guys who will play roles like Cornelius Jefferson, Cedric Lath. We'll see what how much he plays this year as opposed to last year. And then you're bringing in 2 guys who redshirted this past year, like Chase McCarty and Jacob McFarland, who Jacob McFarland I am pretty high on. We'll see how much he ends up playing this next year. But again, I think vibes are at an all-time high. This team should be electric with how much talent they have in that freshman class. And yeah, I'm with you there. I'm willing to go 10.
Perfect. And I do agree with that starting lineup. I feel like it could be one of the best starting lineups that we're going to see. It should be the best one in the Big 12 in terms of both continuity and experience. You have, once again, Tugler, Uzan, and Sharp, who all have that natty championship Final Four experience. And the freshmen, they're going to fit right in. That's how I view it.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think, like you mentioned, I with the continuity and the talent they're bringing in, I think that kind of is. I don't necessarily know if there is a set formula or recipe in terms of roster construction to winning college basketball, but I think that's a great path line to follow on of having your culture program guys that you retain for 2 to 3 years, and then supplementing talented freshmen and transfers, more so freshmen in this case for Houston. Considering that they didn't even bring in a single transfer, but I don't think they necessarily needed to, considering what they brought back and what they're bringing in freshman wise. But I think that pretty much takes care of everything we have on the state of Houston's program going to next year. Again, we're both really, really high on the Cougars. We both think they should be the preseason number 1. Amazing run last year. Fully expect them to probably end up being a 1 seed this year again and make another run at a Final Four. And I'm sure Kelvin Sampson knows he's not going to be coaching for too much longer. So he's going to put it all, I'm sure, into this roster and into the season. I'm super excited to see how they play. But
I agree.
yeah. But again, I think that's going to pretty much take care of everything we have for this first episode of the State of the Program series on the Crossover U podcast. As always, if you like anything you see on this channel, engage with our content any way you can. Until next episode, we'll see you all next time.
Peace.